This is the OMG Book Show with William O'Day, episode number 24. All right, everybody. This is a very special intro to the show today because I'm streaming live from deep within the Amazon jungle. And I'm trying to keep my voice down a little bit because I don't want to attract any unwanted attention. There's this mosquito, right? Get away. Get away. Got it. Anyway, today we have an interview with two luminaries of the indie publishing world. They are J. Thorn and Zach Bohannon. And one very cool thing that they've done recently was called Authors on a Train. It was Jay and Zach and Joanna Penn and Lindsay Baroker, and all four of them rode a train, I believe from Chicago to New Orleans. And on that train they spent the night and had some creepy adventures or something, and they ended up writing a book, all four of them, in just a couple of days while riding on that train to New Orleans. So I decided I wanted to do something similar. And so I decided to do Author in the Amazon. And I probably should have invited 3 other people because I don't feel very safe out here. Oh, and I'm sweating like crazy. I mean, I'm drenched. I look like I jumped into a swimming pool. Oh, good. Here's a log. I'm going to take a seat and catch my breath. Oh, now I wish you could see what I'm seeing right now, ladies and gentlemen. This place is alive. I mean, creepy alive. But there's no reason to worry. I've heard that you're not in any kind of danger, unless you start hearing the monkeys and the baboons start making noises. They're like the jungle's alarm system. Hold on a second. What's that? What are they making noises about? I can see them up in the tree above me. I don't know. They're all jumping around, looking at something. I can't see what it is yet. I gotta get out of here. There's something coming. All right. I think I'm okay. Whatever that was, it was a close one. I just gotta calm down. Whew. My heart is beating. Oh, it feels like a sledgehammer in my chest. Okay. Calm down. What is that? Coming through the trees. Oh no, it's a tiger! It's a tiger! Fortunately, I just interviewed Mark Sullivan and he told me about CrossFit and Aikido, and somehow that means that I think I know how to do it. Let me try. I think I stunned it, but I gotta get out of here. This was a horrible idea. I should have gone with Authors on a Train instead. New Orleans. I could have had beignets.
Welcome to the OMG Book Show, where it's all about taking you into the brains of fantastic authors. No scalpels required. It's more than an interview, it's an experience. And now, your host, William O'Day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. You know, that guy with the super cool voice that does the intro for me, thank you. He does say that it's more than an interview, it's an experience. And I hope, I try to deliver. And that's what the opening to this show was, an attempt at that. And just to have a lot of silly, good fun, because I enjoy that also. And while that was a teleplay, a live performance of Author in the Amazon, I also had a couple of other ideas, maybe creators on a cruise, or writers at a wedding, or maybe novelists in Nottingham. Anyway, hey, those are all just some ideas. Maybe they won't work. Maybe they will. Maybe in the future, you'll hear another live performance. And speaking of good fun, we try one more thing on this show for the first time today. It's called the Word of the Day. And I'll just leave it right there. You'll find out more in the interview. But it will be up to you to judge whether it was a mega success or an abysmal failure, or maybe somewhere in between. So anyway, thanks again for joining me today. We get the pleasure of speaking with Jay Thorn and Zach Bohannon. And just as I had mentioned in the intro, in the Amazon, they are two indies, luminaries in the indie space, and they're doing lots of cool things. And also, like I'd mentioned, they did something last year, or maybe 2 years ago, called Authors on a Train. And then that proved to be such such a fun and successful experiment, they then offered it out to a wider community. And we hear about that today in the interview. And we also get into a lot of depth and width about collaboration, because obviously these two guys co-write together. So collaboration is a key part of their business. And some of the particulars that we discuss about collaboration is how they work together. They both kind of fit into the writing process kind of as puzzle pieces that fit together. So they both kind of tackle different areas, and they talk about how that works for them. And they also talk about just suggestions in general for people who are looking to collaborate. And while we're talking about writing in particular on this show, the things that they talk about really are just great guidelines for collaboration in general. So it's really fascinating to hear them and their experienced perspective on how that works. And we also get to hear about how each of our partners feel about hair on your head, and then also facial hair, and how those two may or may not relate. We hear all about that, which is pretty hilarious. And we have a fun Rorschach round as well. It's a great interview overall. I think you guys will be entertained and educated at the same time. I know I was. So without further ado, surgical gloves on, metaphorical scalpel in hand. Let's get started. Thank you, gentlemen, both for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
So let me start with one thing. I've never done this on the show before, and we will only do it if you guys are both up for it. But I had this idea. So it's called the word of the day. And the way it would work out is you guys, either in collaboration, because you're clearly good at that, or one of you other could take the lead, is we could come up with a word. For example, like, just as a writer, I've never used it in a story, but I love the word mellifluous. And I'm like, you know what? What if a guest on the show had a favorite word like that? And then at some point during the show, our jobs kind of in the background would be try to work that word into the conversation in a natural way. What do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah. See, my position is that whenever I write words, Jay just changes them. So like he'd have to come up with a word in this instance. He's just going to change whatever I say anyway. So.
All right. Well, what do you think? We don't have to do this. And as I'm saying, I'm springing this on you. It's the first time I've even thought of it. But what do you say? Should we try it? It might be fun.
I'm up for anything. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
All right. So, Jay, would you like to come up with the word that we will all try to use in some fashion?
I put you on the spot.
How about tangential?
Tangential. All right. I'm going to write
I always like the sound of that word, the way either the syllables are mixed.
Okay. And then should I read an official definition so that fans and listeners out there know, or do you want to throw one at us?
That's probably a good idea.
Here we go. Tangential, the definition, relating to or along a tangent. I think it's unfair when they use the word in the definition of the word.
Yeah, that's cheating, isn't it?
That's true.
All right, so next one down. Diverging from a previous course or line, erratic. Okay, there we go.
Okay, that works.
All right, I've written it down, and I'm sure I'm probably going to fail at this, but it seems fun, like we should try it. All right. Let's see, gentlemen. I wanted to start out, as we often do on this show, and just ask you each, and I don't know how, maybe this is part of the collaboration aspect, is who could jump in first to discuss it, but how did each of you get started in storytelling?
You want to go first, or since you're older?
Okay, yeah, I'm significantly older than Zach, so he's gonna defer to his elder and let me go first.
And you're presumably wiser too, right? Is that part of it?
Yeah, that's very true.
I think that's how it works.
Okay.
Storytelling. Well, my earliest formal memories of storytelling is being a dungeon master for the neighborhood D&D geeks, and so that goes back to 8, 9, 10, 11 years old or so. And really kind of been an educator and storyteller my whole life. And right around 2008, 2009, I read Stephen King's On Writing and had this crazy idea I was going to just write a epic fantasy trilogy, because why not? I'd never written anything before, and or any fiction rather. And that didn't work out so well. But fast forward almost 10 years later, and I'm sitting here with Zach as part of Molten Universe Media, and we're kind of doing this every day. So that's the short, non-boring version.
Well, that sounds very cool. In that trilogy, and first of all, congratulations for being wildly ambitious right out of the gate.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Starry-eyed. None of us would probably ever do anything if we knew how difficult it really was going to be from the outset. That's
exactly what it was. I had no idea what I was getting into.
Did you make it even through like the first book of that planned trilogy?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wrote it and published it and have since unpublished it. So it's about 180,000 words just sitting on a hard drive now.
Oh wow! And is it in a state that could ever be resurrected, or is it just lost to history?
It's possible, but it would take a lot of work, and sometimes what's really challenging as a writer is trying to figure out, like, is it worth putting the time in to fix that as opposed to just creating new words, because we're word factories, Zach and I. We just make it, we'll just make more words.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's easy to get lost in that rabbit hole of like endless revisions to existing work.
Yeah, it is. It is. Because, plus it was something that was written a long time ago. And I just feel like the amount of effort it would take might not be worth it.
Right. And then Zach, what about you? Where did you first fall in love with this idea of writing?
Yeah. I always when I was growing up, I always wrote stories and stuff. And I remember having very fond memories of like trying to like put together my own Sports Illustrated and stuff like that, and like drawing little basketball players and stuff, and trying to write these little articles when I was like 5 or 6 years old or whatever. And I always loved story. And it was funny because I never really enjoyed reading that much in school, and I think it was because of what they forced you to read. Right. But there's more ways to take in story than just reading. Movies, TV shows, video games, all those different ways. And when I was a teenager, I played and I started playing in metal bands and stuff, and started writing lyrics. And I think that's where it really hit me that like I enjoyed writing. Was like through writing lyrics and yeah. So eventually, it was like I always had in my mind I wanted to write something, and had like stopped and started several novels. And it wasn't until some nonfiction stuff I'd done that I actually completed something, and then one day I was like, I'm actually going to finish a novel, and I did and published it, and here we are. So, so pretty simple story as well. So
very cool. Very cool. And I listened to your, the Career Author podcast. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So everyone out there, go check it out if you get the chance. This show is kind of geared towards both fans and working aspiring writers. So if you're on the latter half of that, definitely go check it out. It's very cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to ask about that was, Jay, you had mentioned, I think it was you had mentioned that before meeting up with Zach, you had gone through a number of almost kind of trial marriages of the collaboration with other people. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. And I still have some collaborations and co-writing situations that are ongoing. So, for example, Glenn James and I write in the Dustfall series together. So that's ongoing. We're drafting book 5 now. We've got 4 books in that series out, and yeah, I've done a lot of different types of collaboration too. So when I first started, most of the collaboration was on the marketing side. So in 2011, 2012, I was putting together these multi-author box sets on Amazon, and that's kind of where it started. And then it moved over into the creative side. So I co-wrote with Dan Padavana and Joanna Penn, and then Zach and I and Lindsay Broker and Joanna Penn collaborated in New Orleans last year. And now Zach and I are to the point with Molten Universe Media that we're, other than sort of pre-existing situations we had, we're really focusing on our stuff right now because we kind of feel like we're in a groove, honestly.
Yeah, that's very cool. And then what about all of those collaborations you mentioned sound like they turned out pretty well. Have you had any spectacularly awful debacle type collaborations?
Of course. One of the things I tell people is that, whenever you're thinking about collaborating, and this is true whether you're writing or whether you're putting a band together or a theater production, there's no guarantees. If you're on the dating scene, like there's no guarantees, and not every collaboration is going to work out. And in fact, you should anticipate some of them not working out well. And I have had some really not nasty, but just I've had some situations then that I haven't felt great about. And honestly, I'm well over a dozen collaborations that have failed at different stages and in different ways. So it's an inherent risk, and I think as an entrepreneur, you try 10 things and hope that one of them works. And the odds are a little better with collaboration, but you have to be prepared for some of them not to work out.
Very cool. And then Zach, can you tell us about how did you meet up with Jay and the collaboration that kind of seems to be the focus for both of your careers? How did that get going?
Oh, I was a fanboy. That's the short answer.
But he didn't think you were creepy, though, apparently, or maybe he got over it.
You have to ask him that. I don't know, but
I don't know. We're sitting in a hotel room together now, so I don't know what that says.
Yeah, it's fine. Intimacy's good.
But no, Jay's been at this game a little bit a couple years longer than I have. So when I was kind of getting started and wanting to really figure out this self-publishing thing, at the time, Jay was doing a podcast called the Horror Writers Podcast. And I stumbled across that on iTunes and I started listening, and I ended up buying some of his books and checking them out, and just kind of I literally was a fan, and ended up reaching out to him through email and just kind of telling him like, hey, I enjoy the podcast. I'm read some of your stuff, and kind of was telling him my situation, how I was working on something, and actually sent him an early version of my book, which is hilarious because like now I cringe that I even did that. But because I would, yeah. So things just kind of grew from there. We figured out that we had a lot of stuff in common as far as like music and the type of movies we like, type of stuff we like to read, and things just kind of like progressed, just like any friendship or relationship. Like it just kind of one thing led to another, as they say, and here we are. So yeah, I was a fanboy.
Very cool. So clearly it's working on the career writing level. Do you guys, I think you both have a history of playing heavy metal. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yes.
Do you guys ever jam on the musical side?
We haven't had a chance to yet. I have a feeling that at some point we will, because he's a guitar player and I'm a drummer. So it would make sense. But we have not had the chance, not been in the same room with instruments yet. So,
all right. I think we can all, maybe that will be one of the special downloads or whatever in the Patreon members accounts.
Yeah, you never know.
Well, you had mentioned I think Jay mentioned it, the Molten Universe Media. What would you like? What kind of describe that to me? What's going on there?
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, it's a publishing company, but right now it's just Zach and I. And what we're doing is we're sort of specializing in dystopian and post-apocalyptic dark fiction, and that's all different flavors and varieties of those subgenres. And right now our focus is on establishing a really nice backlist, giving readers a lot of options in a lot of different worlds. We're trying to publish on a very regular basis. And that's kind of phase one, is to build up that back catalog. And then phase two, which we're sort of approaching momentarily, is we're gonna be collaborating with other people in different ways. We might expand out into different mediums, things like movies, television, video games. So we have some big dreams and we have some ideas, but we realize right now that we're both relatively new to this full-time writing thing, and that we sort of have to establish base readership, and that's kind of where Molten Universe Media is right now.
And then I had read, or not read, I think I'd heard in maybe one of your podcasts that you had mentioned kind of Michael Anderle and what he's doing, and the Sterling Stone guys, and how those gents are kind of trying to build an empire of publishing. and then in some ways that differed from your goals for Molten Media. What did you mean by that? That
is a great question, and something we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And it's something we're gonna be talking about at some upcoming speaking and events that we have. Yeah, in all seriousness, like we're not trying to do what Sterling and Stone and Michael Anderle is doing, and we're not saying it's not a judgment or right or wrong. our goals are different. Our intentions are different. And Zach and I have no interest in building a corporation and having employees and sort of building something at that scale. What we're really interested in doing and what we enjoy is telling stories together. And that's what we want to build on. And a big component of what we're doing is also teaching. Zach has a background. He's been a personal trainer and a coach. I taught for 25 years. And so what we're doing is we're applying a lot of those ideas and mindsets from education, and we want to be teachers as well. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach in that we want to be collaborating with other people. We want to build out this wonderful world of fiction. And at the same time, we want to sort of help people by teaching them some of the things that they can do to kind of then go off on their own and do similar things.
Very cool. And I think it makes sense. You're talking about the personal trainer and then being a professor. There are elements of motivation in addition to education there. That seems like a good fit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm stepping all over Zach here, but
no, it's fine.
Like one of the things that I realized early on from teaching is that experts don't always make the best teachers. You can have someone who's a world-class athlete or musician, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can teach other people how to take a jump shot or how to compose a song.
Right.
And so I think that's that's something that's a little harder to figure out, and it's a little more nebulous, but the biggest thing I think we can bring it as teachers or educators in different varieties is that sort of breaking down very complex things into a systemized process and doing it in a very organized and straightforward way is something that I think Zach and I are really good at.
Yeah. Very cool. And I think I think you can tell from the other side of it, that you guys have a passion for helping others to learn, which I think is key to getting that message across.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree with that.
Yeah. Zach and I have talked about this independent publishing world or publishing world in general. And the two of us we don't see any other writer, whether they're traditionally published or independently published, as competition. Our competition is Netflix and Facebook and Instagram and the other distractions that people have available to them or entertainment.
Right.
So, a win for readers and writers is a win for all of us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's an infinite number of distractions available to the average person these days. Yeah,
and my own personal perspective is that reading is fundamental to being a citizen of the world, and one of the most important things you can do with your time is read.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, and it was kind of going back to the day when J.K. Rowling obviously had absolutely massive, major success, and just how many kids, even in my world, which at that time wasn't surrounded with them as much as it is today, but just how easy it was to see just waves and waves of kids picking up reading where they might not have otherwise. And it was just fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. That's what it's all about.
Well, Zach, I wanted to ask you, clearly you guys are into the idea of collaboration. What convinced you that collaborating with Jay or other folks, if you do, was a superior approach to your career than just, going it on your own?
Yeah. So I think for me personally, and this is something that Jay and I kind of agreed on, or we say a lot, is that, we feel like that the stuff we do together is better than what we could produce on our own. And for me personally, a big part of that is the fact that he and I are opposites as far as the stuff we really prefer to do in the process of writing a book. So what I mean by that is that we both, we both enjoy the pre-production part, as far as outline and stuff. So we're kind of, we're equally involved in that. It may vary from different projects. I might be a little heavier on one project and he might be a little more involved on another, but, pretty much the rest of the process from there on out is exactly the same, where I first draft the book and Jay comes behind me and edits. So, the convincing I needed was that I wasn't gonna have to do any editing. Because I hate doing, I don't want to say I hate doing revisions, because and Jay will tell you that there's days where I say I hate doing them and never want to do them, and then there's other days where I'm like, oh, I want to do some revisions because I'm bored with first drafting right now. But overall in the process, I would much prefer to be able to write a first draft and then be done with my part of the book.
Right.
And whereas Jay is the opposite, to where he, you know, he will first draft and enjoys, but what he really loves and what he really gets into is when he has something that is in, you know, a skeleton of something that he can, you know, mold, and really build on and go through and deconstruct every sentence and every paragraph. And so for me, being able to do more of the part of the process I love was enough convincing for me. And then, like I said, on top of that, like realizing that what we're doing together is way better than what we would do on our own. So I would say those are the two main factors.
Right. And did you maybe after that first successful story came together, did you have a moment where you were like, you complete me, that kind of thing?
I don't know if it was quite that romantic, but
well, no, I'm sorry. Was there were romantic overtones there? I didn't mean for that to happen.
No, we did, and you know the other thing. So you know what Zach mentioned is really important. Where you know if you're looking to collaborate, the normal approach or the conventional approach would be look for someone just like you. And what we did was we found complementary skill sets, and you know what he doesn't like to do, I like to do. But the other side to it, and this is something that isn't as discussed as much, is that Zach and I are both in a very similar life situation. We're not the same age exactly, but we both have sort of the same level of ambition and responsibilities and family situations
and
goals. Yeah. And like, you know, we both sort of want the same things out of this, and we have this very similar lifestyles. And that's really important, because if you're not pairing up with someone who also shares that, then you might have one person who's really pulling hard and someone else who's kind of digging their heels in. Whereas with Zach and I, like our pace as far as our career goes feels like it's running parallel.
Right. Very cool. That's a great point to bring up. Clearly, I was just looking through your Amazon page. You've successfully put out quite a few books together, and it sounds like things are going great. Did you ever have a moment where, whatever the situation, where you were just kind of like, nah, I don't think this can work? Any sort of challenge like that?
I haven't really. I mean, honestly, everything so far has gone pretty smooth. So, and like I said, the stuff we've done together has been the best stuff I've ever written. So for me, I would say no. I mean, there are some things to consider, we're both full time at this and we're splitting the royalties. So, I mean, that could creep in if I let it, I guess, where it's like, man, if I was doing this on my own, I'd be getting 100% of the royalties, not 50%. And it might, but again, I wouldn't be writing as good of stuff. So,
right.
I would say for me, no, I don't think it's really creeped in, not yet, at least.
No. And the other thing that's such an interesting question that you've asked, because what it also does is for me, for like the first time sitting here, I'm realizing like I never questioned it at all. And I think part of it was, we knew we were crafting better stories together than we could separately. And we knew that readers were engaging with that based on page reads and sales and what we were seeing in our dashboard. And I think the moment for me where it really all came together and I realized like, yeah, this is a great partnership was the retreat we did to New Orleans in November, the Authors on a Train retreat. And we came up with that idea together, sitting at a cafe, and then six months later, we did it, and it went really well, and everyone got so much out of it. And I thought, from a business perspective, like as you were asking that question now, like we've worked on these really intense projects together, both in person and separately, and we really seem to be in sync. So. Like for me, that fall trip was a really great indicator.
Yeah. And I think that's good to bring up too, because if we weren't collaborating, I don't think we would have done those trips and those events. And those events were something, or Authors on a Train specifically, was like really fulfilling, and something that I would have never thought about doing that if it was just me.
Yeah, it is. In case folks out there haven't heard, I'm sure a lot of people have, just because it made the rounds and it's just such a cool concept. And let me, or maybe you guys can explain it. You initially started with 2 other authors, and can you give us the overview of how that all went down?
Yeah, we were kind of joking around that it would be cool to co-write on a train, because I had for my other job I traveled on train a lot, and Zach and I basically got Lindsay Broker and Joanna Penn to join us, and we met in Chicago and decided we were going to write a novella in my American Demon Hunters world. And we got to Chicago on a Sunday night, and we took the overnight train down to New Orleans, and we spent the week down there co-writing this novella. And we had such an amazing time that when we were talking to Joanna and Lindsay over dinner, we were like, we'd love to do this for other people. We'd love to give other people the experience that we just had. And both of them kind of jokingly said, "Hey, that sounds great. Leave us out of it." And so Zach and I sat down at a cafe on one of the last nights in New Orleans, and we kind of talked about it, and it seemed kind of like a crazy idea. And it wasn't. I mean, it was crazy, but it was incredibly fun and satisfying. And we took we had 8. We decided we were going to take 8 people, and we took 8 people from Chicago to New Orleans back in November. And it wasn't the exact same trip, and but what we did is we sort of paired people up, and they got to know each other ahead of time, and they co-wrote a short story. Zach and I offered seminars and workshops in the afternoon. We spent the days together, touring the French Quarter, drinking coffee and beignets, hanging out. We had a great week, and then everyone went home on Friday. And a few weeks later, Zach and I put the finishing touches on Dark Shadows, which is the short story anthology that we published from all those 8 authors.
That is so incredibly cool. And what was the name of the novella that came out of that original first trip?
That was American Demon Hunter's Sacrifice.
I've got so many questions about that idea just because it's so cool. Had you ever considered doing the same kind of trip, but in another medium, say like on a cruise ship, or say floating down the Amazon River or something like that? Yeah,
definitely. There are cruise ships, and there are people doing, I saw one writing retreat on a cruise ship. We go back to what you asked us about Molten Universe Media. Like, we're just 2 guys. We don't have a staff. Neither of us have a virtual assistant. No one's handling our email for us. We're doing everything ourselves. And so one of the things we have to be careful of is getting too excited about things and stretching ourselves too thin.
Right.
And so we made a really deliberate decision that we were going to offer the exact same trip in 2018 that we did in 2017 around the same time. But that's the only Authors on a Train trip we're doing this year. And there's no guarantee we're going to do it next year. So, we're trying to kind of discipline ourselves as well, because we want to deliver the best experience we possibly can. And so we don't want to get too crazy too soon.
Right. That makes sense. It sounds like even, as it currently stands, you guys have a lot of different coals in the fire at the same time.
Plus, Authors on a Train sounds way better than Authors on Carnival Cruise Line or something like that. So, and when when we hear people's reply of, "Oh my God, I've never thought about riding on a train. That'd be so cool. I've never ridden the Amtrak." Like, it's just, there's a lot of excitement that goes with it. So, and Jay has so much experience traveling through Amtrak and stuff that it just kind of makes sense for us. So.
I have enough miles to circumnavigate the globe on the rails.
Oh, you do? Wow. Yeah. What took you, aside from this trip we're discussing, or 2 trips, what in the past before that, why were you traveling all over the place?
Because he hates flying.
Oh. Yeah, that's part of it. I hate flying, and I for the day job, there was, I live in Cleveland. There was an event in San Francisco, and I'm like, I'm not flying to San Francisco, and I kind of jokingly said, you know what? I could take a train. I've always wanted to cross the country on a train. And my wife was like, "Oh, they'll never pay for that. And they'll never go for that." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm going to ask, because the worst they'll say is no." And they said yes. So my employer paid for me. It's a 52-hour train ride from Chicago to San Francisco on the California Zephyr. And it's the most amazing trip you would ever take. It goes through the Rocky Mountains and through the Sierra Nevadas, and it's unbelievable. And that was where it all started for me. I was loving trains after that.
That is so cool. Yeah. I mean, I haven't taken an overnight train, but there is the feeling of kind of like a mystique to it, you know, that you obviously don't get crammed into a little cabin with everyone coughing everywhere.
Yeah, there really is.
Well, I wanted to ask you both about touching back to your work process. And it sounds like you generally, Zach being on the first draft side and then you, Jay, being on the editing side. But taking a step back before that, how do you guys work the kind of building the structure of the story and just, just the steps before even the first draft?
Well, you're the story grid guy, so why don't you take that one?
All right. So
I know you're talking a lot, but that's your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So Zach mentioned I'm a certified story grid editor, and that won't mean much to readers, but for writers, that's the methodology that Sean Coyne developed at storygrid.com. And I recently got formally trained on that. And Zach and I really leverage the power of the story grid. And it's a methodology instead of a formula. So that it's not any kind of lockstep. It doesn't cramp our creativity. But what it allows us to do is kind of speak the same language. So when we're talking about, an inciting incident that leads into a progressive complication, like we both know what that means. And we know what a good one is versus a bad one. And so a lot of our early planning is sort of brainstorming around ideas. And right now we're focused on post-apocalyptic and dystopian stories. So we know what those genre readers expect. We know which of the conventions we have to honor and which are the ones we can innovate on. And so we start with concepts or ideas. And then depending on the project, I might throw some scenes at Zach, or he might throw them at me, and we go back and forth. And then we kind of settle on a generalized outline, and our outlines are more like story beats. They're, a couple of bullet points per chapter. So we still have a lot of room to get creative within that structure. And that's usually how it works. And, so it really is project dependent as far as like who's bringing the original idea. But by the time we get to the first draft, it's both of ours.
Very cool. And Zach, maybe you could tell us about it, in all these collaborations you've had thus far. Was there one that kind of stuck out above the others as being more challenging?
That's actually the one we just came off of, the book we just released was definitely that one. So we just released a book called it's the second book in the Barren trilogy.
Okay.
It's called Escape in the Ruins. And what made that, Escape from the Ruins. And what made that challenging for me is that I was not involved in the first book at all. That was a book that Jay had written solo. So he planned it. He wrote the book. He did all that. I mean, I wasn't involved at all, except other than I was kind of an alpha reader early on who, read the book early and I was a fan of the book. I mean, it was my favorite thing Jay had done, honestly. But when the time came to do a sequel, Jay had some basic notes and stuff written out, but basically came to me and was like, "Hey, we're crushing it. Like as far as our process and stuff, and we're really in a groove. So why don't you just come in on the series with me and finish it?" So I immediately said yes. But it was definitely a challenge because Jay had already established the world and the story through the first book, and he already had a general idea of how the second and third book were going to go and how the whole story is going to end. And no matter how much I read the first book or it doesn't matter because it's still difficult for me because he's already got so many ideas established. And it was kind of he was open to ideas I had, but like I wasn't super comfortable like coming in and saying, "Oh, we should do this," because it was stuff that we hadn't come up with together.
Right.
If that makes sense. So it made writing that book pretty challenging to the point where there were some scenes when I got to him, I just had to hit him up on Slack and be like, "Dude, like, I don't really know what you're thinking here. And, I don't know what's supposed to be in this character's head. Like, I think you need to write this scene." And we actually got several chapters in the book and Jay kind of realized like, "Oh, I didn't like, I need to flesh this outline out a little more because he doesn't really fully understand what was in my head. So we had a really good learning process there that'll definitely help us when we go do the third book. So that combined with me being a little bit more familiar with where the story's headed and stuff really helps. But it was definitely challenging, but having the trust in my collaborator that I know that he's going to come behind me and fix it was like, or not fix it, well, like change things or put him more to where he was thinking, like really, really helped. And the fact that I trust him made that a lot easier, but it was definitely a challenge.
The process that you guys have put together just sounds really amazing. I know there are a lot of people out there who are aspiring writers that want to hook up with other writers to create this kind of synergy like you're talking about. It's very cool.
And I think something important to understand with that too is that, like, yes, we have a process, but it also changes a lot. Like, not any one project is the same. So early on, like, I would write the entire first draft and then send him the whole book at one time. And then we realized we could iterate on that. So now I write one chapter, drop it in Google Drive, let him know, and he edits right behind me. So he's always pretty much in the same spot in the book as I am. So like if he catches something or like, oh, hey, this character shouldn't be acting this way, like we can fix it right there instead of catching it at the end and having to edit everything later. So I say all that to say that, like, there's a lot of different ways to collaborate and to do this, and there's not one way that's best for everybody. It's not one size fits all. Right. So even Jay's partnership with Glenn is way different in the way they collaborate. So, and it will evolve like with each project. So.
No, that's very cool. I wanted to ask you both, you guys have clearly come a long way in the space of time that you've been pursuing this as a career already. And you obviously got big plans going forward. If each of you could go back and, send a time capsule tachyon through time message to your younger writing selves, that person just starting out. Is there anything that you would say to that person?
Yeah, I would tell that guy to write in the genre you love and pick a genre and stick to it. Damn it.
Oh, okay. That sounds like. Is there a history there? Did you genre jump for a long time?
Well, I don't know. I didn't necessarily genre jump. I mean, everything I've written has had sort of a dark edge to it, whether you call it horror, dark fantasy, or post-apocalyptic. But one of the things that Zach helped me realize is that, and this is really kind of baked into what we do now, is like we both love post-apocalyptic and dystopian fiction. We're huge fans of it. We read it, we watch movies, we watch television. So that's the stuff we write, and there's a market for it, and we know there's a market for it. There's a category on Amazon for it. It's very clear. We know what those readers want because we are those readers. Right. And early on, I was a special snowflake. I wanted to write unique stories that no one else had ever told, and that's so total bull. It's not how it is. We all like to think we have these special, unique stories, but there's really only a handful of stories that have ever been told, and the creativity comes in how you tell them. So I think I had to get over myself, and it took me a while, that, it wasn't about telling unique stories, because if I did that, no one would read them. And so I think that's what I would mention to my younger self.
Very cool. What about you, Zach?
Well, and just to kind of build on one thing Jay said too, I think the important thing to point out is that to highlight is him saying, it's a genre that we love. So it's not like we're writing this stuff just because it's commercially viable, and we actually love writing the stories and love the genre. So, oh God, what would I go back and tell myself? Oh my gosh. I think one thing, and this is more from like a nuts and bolts, like marketing perspective, but one mistake, I guess I made early on was, I finished the first book in a series, and then instead of writing the second book in a series, I went and started writing some standalone horror thing. And then when my first book came out of the gates and took off, I wasn't working on the second book when I should have been. Right. And so I feel like I could have built on that a little more. So I think one thing I would have done is probably wrote the first 3 books in that series first. But when you're beginning, you just want to get something out there, and you don't think that you're going to sell that many copies anyway. So, but if I knew what I knew now, that would probably be the big thing that that I would have done is, written those first 3 books, and spend a little more time with them and then put them out.
Right on. I think those are both fantastic perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I also post-apocalyptic, dystopian, etc. Totally love it across all mediums, just like you guys. So what is it for each of you that draws you to it so much? Like, what about it that you think is so awesome?
Oh man, we could do a whole episode just on that. For me, it's really comforting, which sounds odd. Most people think like, post-apocalyptic, that stuff's dark and violent, but there's always a thread of hope that runs through all of those shows and books and movies, and that sort of, no matter how bad things get, like there's always a chance, there's always hope, and I think it's that coupled with this very fictionalized romantic notion of the world being empty, and you can kind of do what you want in it and make up your own rules.
Right.
And, there's a little bit of anarchist in me there, a little bit of a revolutionary that would probably somewhat enjoy that. But that is a fantasy, I think, too. And that harkens back to, the American tradition of the Western cowboy and the rugged individualist. I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, right on. What about you, Zach?
I honestly don't think I think he kind of nailed my feelings on it too. Actually, I don't really think I have much. I think it's just, for me, it's just kind of crazy to think about, what the world would be like if we didn't have all these luxuries we have all of a sudden, and what that would be like. And it's crazy. It's kind of nuts to think about, and just like Jay said, like running around in this empty world and stuff. It's just, it's just, I don't know, for some reason, it just is appealing to me in a really strange way. So,
yeah, I agree with both of those. And for me, I would also add, there's like and maybe everybody feels this way about the times they're in, but it feels like, on a global level, the times they feel they're shaky, so it feels like there's some kind of subconscious thread, that you can just like a simmering sort of stress or something of like something really huge and bad could happen,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, it's unfortunate in a way that, we have the age of the Enlightenment and different intellectual movements throughout history. And I really feel like we're going to be labeled as like the age of fear. It feels like fear is the predominant emotion in this generation. And there's nothing we can do about that. But I agree with you, William, that I think that is probably a contributor to why people like this escapist type of fiction or entertainment.
Yeah. It's a way to kind of touch that emotion or whatever. But of course, like you're saying, it's fictionalized, and fortunately, the vast majority of us don't have to deal with the insanity we present in our books.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to also ask, this is just to let fans and listeners, readers out there get to know both of you guys a little better. Going back before you were luminaries in the indie publishing field, and this is tangentially related. Ding, 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 ding,
there
ding, ding.
it is. There it is. I was going to try to use it earlier, but I couldn't remember the word. It was bothering me. So
I don't know. I may have just broken the rules because I did add the LLY at the end. So I don't know. Anyway, we'll just call it a success.
We'll let it pass. That counts.
Right on. Well, let's start with Zach. I wanted to ask, just for fun, to let folks out there know, what was the looking back on your life, what's the worst job you've ever had?
It's funny because I've actually been really fortunate where I've actually usually had pretty cool jobs, to be honest with you.
Oh, nice.
So like I worked in a record store for a while. And then I worked in music retail, and then I worked for a really cool heavy metal company, that made a music instrument company where I got to like travel and do stuff like that. Like I've had pretty cool jobs, and they've all pretty much been based around music. And now I'm an author. So, but my first 2 jobs, I guess, like either one of them, Jay's going to have a way better answer than me. I know he is, because I think he dug ditches or worked in a mine or something. But I worked on a packaging line for like a company that makes hunting calls.
Okay.
And it was terrible. And then I was a bus boy at a restaurant at a hotel. And that job sucked because my dad ran the hotel. So like everyone treated me different. And like always would try to suck up to me and stuff. And I was like 14 and I still realized it. So, those two probably being a tie. But other than that, I've actually been really lucky to have some pretty cool jobs, honestly.
All right, Jay, have you, has your life had similar luck?
Yeah, I think, for most of my adult life, I was sort of a white collar professional, but, when I was in, high school and college, I had a job as at a car wash, and and this was an automated car wash. And when you're a kid at a car wash, you get literally the lowest position, which means I spent all day bending over wiping rims.
Ouch.
And just backbreaking, filthy, thankless work. The people would come out and you'd wipe the rims and they'd hand the tip to the guy pulling the car off the line. And you're like, oh man, I earned that, not you. And like that was, it was mind numbing mentally because of the task that I had. And it was backbreaking physical labor and it was outside. And this was in Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh in the wintertime, it can get quite cold. And that car wash was open all the time. So I think that was I could definitely say that was my worst job.
At least you weren't moonlighting doing that when you were still a teacher like Walter White in Breaking Bad. Which is exactly what he was doing. He was moonlighting as a car wash guy. Yep. So that's funny. Yep.
Well, we all know how his life ended up, and I think yours is pointed in a better direction.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Well, I wanted to bring it back. I was just looking at my notes here, and one thing I wanted to ask you guys about is in their career author podcast, and maybe it's the first one. One of the benefits you offer folks are these kind of story breakdowns of popular movies. And the one that I listened to, and maybe the first one you did, was I Am Legend.
Yes.
And why did you guys pick that to start that process?
That particular movie?
Yes.
Yeah, we're. I can't wait to hear you talk a little bit about this because you kind of teased me with something. But yeah, we were. Picking that first one was a really deliberate choice because we knew we wanted to give it to everyone for free so we could show people what this movie breakdown thing was. And we wanted to do a movie that we both loved, that we knew, that we probably watched multiple times. And I don't think we spent too long talking about it. I think we kind of knew pretty early on that was the movie we wanted to do because we were huge fans of the original book and some of the original Hollywood movies. And both of us loved that version as well. And it just seemed like a no-brainer.
And did you guys like the novel, or I'm not sure if it's a novella or a novel, but the written story ending, or the Hollywood movie ending better?
I don't know. I kind of treat them as their own different things. Yeah, I don't personally. Like I don't even really like because I like them both honestly, and really try to. And I think we talked about this in the episode how we kind of treat them as their own thing honestly. So I don't really have a preference one way or the other honestly.
Okay. And for everyone out there, and probably have heard me mention it on the show before, maybe not the specifics, but Jay was referring to, I used to do Hollywood visual effects in movies for big movies like this, and it was a lot of fun. Nice career. But we did, one of the movies I worked on was I Am Legend. And so all of those creepy, what do we call them? Hemosites? Do you guys remember? I forget the name of those monsters.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Hemosites, maybe. I could have that wrong. But anyway, whatever those monsters are, when they're all rushing him at the end and chasing him around the city, the team that I managed at ImageWorks, Sony, we put all those together. And it was a lot of fun.
Bravo, dude. That was great.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And trust me, if you were to see the original footage of basically Will Smith running across a green screen, it's not nearly as scary.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool, man, that you got to do that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But there came a time, and maybe everybody comes to this when they want to change careers, but after doing it for about 15 years or so, I got tired of helping other people tell their stories,
Sure.
Yeah.
Get that totally.
Yeah, and there was just like a passion of like, you know what, it's going to be a much smaller scale, obviously, but I just want to tell my own, and that's where it's going.
Yeah, and I realize it is kind of an obscure movie for us to have picked for our first one. It's like, it's not like we picked like Star Wars or something that like, but so I don't know, maybe we end up doing that one so we'd be here talking to you. Who knows?
It's a good kismet or something. It was very cool just when I jumped on your Patreon area and saw it, and I was like, oh, that's so fun. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it.
It's funny.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, and that can mean only one thing. Welcome to the Rorschach round, where we use ambiguously odd questions to delve deeper into the minds of these amazing authors. Let's get started. We have a segment that we call the Rorschach round. Have you heard of it?
No, but I'm guessing I know where you're going with it.
Well, it's maybe you already have it right in your head, but it's basically where I ask each of you a few ambiguously odd questions to help readers, fans, and listeners delve deeper into your minds.
All right,
let's do it.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. Let's go with Jay here, and then maybe Zach after, and we'll switch it around. What's the number one thing you haven't done yet that you'd still love to do?
Hike the Appalachian Trail.
Wow, that'd be cool. What about you, Zach?
I have this like weird bucket list thing. I'm a huge hockey fan, and I really want to go see a professional game in every single. So that's something that I would really like to do, especially in Canada.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
It's a weird one, but an expensive one. But
and does it bother you that see, I'm a huge fan of soccer, world football or whatever, but soccer gets no love in the United States. Hockey, yeah. I think it's about the same thing. Do you wish hockey was bigger here?
I don't really care, honestly. Like it's like I like it. So, and I live in a city that has a team that they really love. So it's like I don't love their team, but so I guess I don't feel that as much where I live since the people really support the team where I'm at. So,
oh, very cool. All right, next question, Zach. If you were to ever write an autobiography, what would it be titled?
Oh man, that's a really good one. Probably something like, "What the hell am I doing here?" I don't know. Like, yeah, something like that. I don't know. What about you, Jay?
Oh God, you really stumped me on that. And I even had time to think about it while Zach answered, and I just drew a blank. So maybe that's it. Drawing blanks.
Drawing blanks. Yeah, there we go. That works. All right. So the next few questions are much easier. Really minimal thought required. It's very much like the Rorschach test where you have the little shapes that come out meaning something. So heavy metal or heavy wood?
Heavy metal.
Heavy metal.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. And then next question, Barren or Barren?
Barren.
Okay.
Mine would probably be Barren.
See, I don't try to make it so easy that everybody will go the same way. All right. And then the last question of the Rorschach round, beards or bards?
Oh, definitely beards for me.
I think it'd have to be beards. Yeah.
Right on. And Zach, you've got a strong beard. Have you ever entered any sort of beard competitions?
No, I haven't done anything like that. No. It's funny because I've had the beard since like 2003 or something like that. And I just did it then because me and my buddies in my metal bands were like, we're going to grow beards and we're going to look awesome. And now it's like this big thing. And it's like, especially like in Nashville, like everyone, and it's just all these content. I'm just like, oh, whatever. If I shave, my wife will kill me. So that's kind of where I'm at. So at this point, I'm stuck with it. That's fine.
That's amazing because I might see my wife is on the exact opposite end. I grew.
So is Jay's.
You're the same way. I grew a winter beard that I was starting to, not quite totally, but starting to get pretty proud of. And then just like a couple weeks ago, she was like, the beard's been hanging around long enough.
Yeah, I can relate, William.
Yeah, my wife is starting to get a little. She's like, okay, I like the beard, but I don't know about how, because I haven't even trimmed it in like 2.5 years. And she's like, I don't. And my whole thing was I've been waiting for her to tell me, and now she's like, but I'm like, come on, it's basically a trope at this point. I can't get rid of it. So but So we'll see how long.
Right.
Lasts,
well, my wife told me in the same sentence where she was trying to nicely suggest I shave my beard off, she also said, which is what threw me for a loop, she was like, you're starting to look a little bit like Zeus. And for me, I was like, that sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Don't you want to be in love with a god? Come on now.
Exactly. She knows me too well. Unfortunately, she knows I'm not that high up on the list.
My wife says, I can, if I have to deal with the hair, I'm not dealing with the beard. I have to pick one. So,
and so you have long locks there. So it's the beard, I think, that always loses.
Yeah, I can sneak, a month or two growth in here or there, but it's nothing I can sustain long term.
Right on. Well, gentlemen, it has been a lot of fun and a super pleasure talking with you both. But before we go, I would love to know, do you have any upcoming projects that fans and readers should be aware of?
Yeah, we kind of got a lot of stuff going on. We, as I mentioned before, we just released the second book in the Barren trilogy, which is called Escape from the Ruins. I keep saying in the Ruins. That didn't even make sense. Escape from the Ruins. So we've got the first two books of that series are out now, and hopefully the third book will be out sometime, hopefully later this year, early next year. That's kind of the newest thing. We're about to start working on the second book in our War for Earth trilogy, which is like our alien invasion, post-apocalyptic story. So be on the lookout for that pretty soon. So that's it as far as the writing goes, kind of what we're working on. So.
Yeah, and then from the author perspective, we're going to be speaking at the Selmore Book Show Summit in Chicago in early May 4th and 5th. And as we talked about, we have Authors on a Train 2019 scheduled
2018.
18, thank you. Scheduled for November.
2019 is coming up already.
Yeah, getting ahead of myself there. And that's at authorsonatrain.com.
Very cool. Well, all of those sound awesome. We'll make sure and get them in the show notes. And if folks want to find out more about each or both of you, where should they go?
Probably if they go to moltenuniversemedia.com. That's probably the easiest.
I'd say that's probably the best place. So.
Very cool. And we'll get that in the show notes also. Well, gentlemen, you're both lively luminaries, tangentially related to, I was about to butcher that. So. Too much, too soon. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you both so much again. It has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Man. That was a great time.
Very much fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. I had a lot of fun. Special thank you to Jay and Zach for joining us today. That was mucho divertido, gentlemen. And if you'd like to find out more about the various projects and things they've got going on, you can check them out in the show notes. There's links to everything there. And the show notes are in the usual place. That's www.williamoday.com/24. That's the number of the episode, 24. That's it for today. If you would like to be sure to never miss a show and always have them immediately available on your device of choice, you can subscribe by going to www.williamoday.com/iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, I would so appreciate a rating and review on iTunes. They both help with store visibility, and they also let other listeners know if this show is something that they might be interested in checking out. And I've made it easy to access both of those by going to the same link on my website, www.williamoday.com/iTunes. That will have a link there that you can jump over to either subscribe and or maybe all three, rate and review the show. So I would so appreciate that. Thank you so much. That's it for now. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the OMG Book Show. You can find out more at www.williamoday.com.